The morning sun shone through the tall windows of Meridian Combat Academy. The light fell across the main hall, where new students gathered for their first day. This was not just any school. This was the most famous military academy in the galaxy. Only the best young fighters from across the stars could come here. Instructor Vex's Tar stood at the front of the hall. He was a Zephyrian, tall and strong with 4 powerful arms. His dark skin showed many scars from old battles. Each scar told a story of war and victory. He had fought in more battles than most soldiers could count. His reputation was known across the galaxy. Young fighters feared him. But they also wanted to learn from him. The new students filled the hall with noise and excitement. Most of them came from rich and powerful families. There were Altarian nobles, with their shining blue skin and proud faces. They wore expensive clothes covered with medals and family symbols. Their families had ruled star systems for thousands of years. Near them stood the Centauri war caste. These students were born to fight. Their people had been warriors for so long that fighting was in their blood. They talked loudly about their training and their victories in practice battles. Each one tried to sound more impressive than the others. In another group, the Andromedan tactical students studied datapads. They were known for their smart minds and perfect battle plans. Their pale faces showed no emotion as they calculated odds and studied enemy movements. They believed that every battle could be won with the right plan and enough information. All around the hall, young aliens showed off their expensive weapons and armor. They talked about their family names and their home planets. Everyone wanted others to know how important they were. The noise grew louder as more students tried to be heard above the others. Vex-Tar watched them all with cold eyes. He had seen many groups like this before. Most of these students would fail. Their money and family names would not help them when real danger came. Only the strongest and smartest would survive his training. He took pride in breaking down the weak ones and sending them home. His aide, a nervous Gloxian with green skin, stood beside him. The small alien held a datapad with information about each new student. "Sir," the aide whispered, "we have students from 43 different star systems this year. Many are children of generals and planetary rulers." Vex-Tar nodded but did not speak. He continued to watch the crowd. His 4 eyes moved across each face, judging them before training even began. He could usually tell who would succeed and who would fail just by looking at them. The weak ones showed fear, even when they tried to hide it. The strong ones stood straight and met his gaze without looking away. That was when he saw her. In the far corner of the hall sat a small figure. She was human, which was already unusual. Humans were not common at Meridian Academy. Most other species thought humans were too weak and primitive to be good soldiers. But this was not what caught his attention. The girl looked very young, maybe 17 standard years old. She wore simple brown clothes that had been mended several times. Her boots were old and worn from much walking. She had no family symbols, no medals, no signs of wealth or power. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style. She sat quietly on a bench, watching the other students but not trying to join their conversations. While everyone else made noise and tried to get attention, she was almost invisible. She did not boast about her family or her achievements. She did not show off expensive equipment. She just sat and waited, as if she belonged in the shadows. Vex-Tar felt anger rising in his chest. This was Meridian Combat Academy, not some charity school for poor children. Every student here should come from the best families, with the best training and the best equipment. How had this nobody gotten past the selection process? "Who is that?" he asked his aide, pointing one of his forearms toward the corner. The Gloxian looked at his datapad and scrolled through the information. "Her name is Sarah Chen, sir. Human. From the Earth colony on Kepler 7. No family military rank listed. No listed achievements. No sponsor noted." Vex-Tar's anger grew stronger. Someone had made a mistake. Maybe the girl had lied on her application. Maybe she had bribed someone. Maybe the admissions office had confused her with another student. Whatever the reason, she did not belong here. "No sponsor?" Vex-Tar repeated. At Meridian Academy, students needed a sponsor, usually a famous general or planetary leader, who would promise the student was worthy. The sponsors put their own reputation at risk for each student they supported. How did she get accepted without a sponsor? The aide looked nervous. The records show special admission, sir. Approved by the Academy Board directly. No other details are given. This made Vextar even more suspicious. Special admissions were very rare. They were usually only given to students with extraordinary circumstances. War heroes' children, survivors of terrible battles, or students with unique skills. This quiet human girl showed none of these signs. Vextar decided to handle the problem himself. He would go to the girl and ask her directly why she thought she belonged here. When she could not give a good answer, he would escort her out, personally. Better to fix the mistake now than waste time training someone who did not deserve to be here. He started walking across the hall. His heavy footsteps echoed on the stone floor. Other students noticed him moving and stepped aside quickly. They all knew his reputation. When Instructor Vextar walked towards someone with that look on his face, trouble was coming. The human girl noticed him approaching. She stood up slowly and turned to face him. She was even smaller than he had thought, barely reaching his chest. Her face was calm, showing no fear or excitement. This surprised him a little. Most students, especially young ones, showed some emotion when he walked toward them. As he got closer, Vextar prepared the words he would use to dismiss her. He would be firm, but not cruel. He would explain that mistakes happened, and she could probably find a good school on her home planet. Then he would call security to escort her out. But as the girl turned fully toward him, something caught his eye that made him stop walking completely. Vextar stopped walking so suddenly that his aide almost bumped into him. His four eyes focused on something that made his heart beat faster. Strapped across the human girl's back was a sword. Not just any sword, but one that he recognized immediately. The weapon was simple compared to the fancy energy blades and plasma cutters that other students carried. It was made of plain steel that showed signs of age and use. The blade had small scratches and marks that told of many battles. The handle was wrapped in worn leather that had been gripped by many hands over many years. But it was the small details that made Vextar's blood turn cold. The crossguard had spiral etchings carved deep into the metal. These were not decorations. They were the mark of Earth's military forces during the Galactic Wars. More importantly, the pommel had 3 parallel scars cut into it. Vextar knew what those scars meant. He had seen them before. 15 years ago, on a battlefield far from here. Those 3 scars marked the sword as belonging to the 127th Human Shock Division. Vextar's forearms began to shake slightly. His voice, which had been ready to dismiss the girl, now came out as a whisper. "Where did you get that blade?" Sarah Chen looked up at him with steady eyes. She showed no fear of his size or reputation. "It was my grandfather's, sir. Captain Marcus Chen, 127th Human Shock Division." The words hit Vextar like a physical blow. Around them, the noisy hall seemed to grow quiet. Other students stopped talking and turned to listen. Even they could sense that something important was happening, though most did not understand why. Captain Marcus Chen. Vextar remembered that name very well. Every soldier in the galaxy knew that name. It was written in the history books. It was spoken with respect in military academies across all the star systems. It was the name of a legend, but Vextar did not know Marcus Chen from books or stories. He had been there. He had fought beside the human captain during the darkest days of the Galactic Wars. He had seen what the 127th had done at Kepler's Gate. He had watched 50,000 humans hold a line that should have been impossible to defend. "You are his granddaughter?" Vextar asked. His voice was still quiet, but now it carried respect instead of suspicion. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. "He died when I was very young. My grandmother gave me his sword when I turned 16. She said I should carry it if I ever chose to be a soldier." Vextar looked around the hall. The other students were staring now. Some looked confused. Others looked impressed that the human girl had made the famous instructor stop and pay attention to her. But none of them understood the real significance of what they were seeing. "Do you know what your grandfather did?" Vextar asked. Sarah nodded slowly. My grandmother told me some stories. She said he fought in the war against the Void Swarm. She said he died protecting others. But she did not like to talk about the details. She said the war was too painful to remember clearly. Vextar understood why Sarah's grandmother had not wanted to share the full story. The Galactic Wars had been the most terrible conflict in known history. Entire star systems had been consumed. Billions of people had died. The galaxy had almost fallen to an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. The Void Swarm had come from somewhere beyond the known universe. They were not like any enemy anyone had faced before. They were creatures of pure hunger that ate everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire solar systems. They could not be reasoned with or negotiated with. They existed only to consume and grow stronger. When the swarm first appeared, the advanced alien civilizations had been confident. They had powerful energy weapons, strong shields, and smart battle computers. They had won wars against many different enemies using technology and superior tactics. They expected the Void Swarm to be just another enemy to defeat, but the swarm was different. Their living ships could absorb energy weapons and use that power to grow stronger. Traditional shields were useless against enemies that attacked like a living storm. Battle computers could not predict the movements of creatures that did not think like normal beings. One by one, the great military powers fell. The Altarian Empire's golden fleets were consumed in days. The Centauri warcast, who had never lost a major battle, were overwhelmed by enemies that fought without fear or strategy. The Andromedan tactical masters found their perfect plans useless against an enemy that did not follow any known patterns. Humanity had been considered the weakest military force in the galaxy. Their technology was primitive compared to other species. Their weapons were simple projectile guns and basic explosives. Many aliens thought humans were too young and inexperienced to be useful in a real war. But when the advanced weapons failed and the smart tactics proved worthless, humanity's primitive ways suddenly became valuable. Humans still understood warfare in its most basic form. They knew how to fight when fighting seemed hopeless. They knew how to adapt when their plans fell apart. Most importantly, they knew how to keep fighting even when death seemed certain. The 127th Human Shock Division had been formed during the worst part of the war. They were given the most dangerous missions, the ones that other species thought were impossible. They fought with old-fashioned guns, simple explosives, and sometimes just steel blades when everything else failed. Vextar remembered the day he first met Captain Marcus Chen. The Zephyrian had been part of a mixed alien force trying to hold the Kepler's gate system. The gate was a natural space formation that controlled access to 3 different star systems. If it fell to the swarm, 40 billion people would die. The alien forces had already been fighting for weeks. Their numbers were getting smaller each day. Their energy weapons were becoming less effective as the swarm adapted to them. Their commanders were starting to talk about retreat. Then, the humans arrived. 50,000 soldiers in ships that looked ancient compared to alien technology. They carried weapons that other species had stopped using thousands of years ago. Their leader was a quiet man with graying hair, who carried a simple steel sword on his back. Marcus Chen had introduced himself politely to the alien commanders. He had listened to their tactical reports and studied their battle plans. Then he had made a suggestion that shocked everyone. Abandon the technological advantages and fight the swarm in close combat. The alien commanders thought he was crazy. Fighting the Void Swarm up close was considered suicide. But Captain Chen explained that humans had learned something important in their early wars against each other. Sometimes the best weapon against an overwhelming enemy was the willingness to get close enough to hurt them, even if it meant getting hurt in return. Vextar looked at the young woman standing before him. She carried herself with quiet confidence, just like her grandfather had. The sword on her back was the same one that Marcus Chen had carried into the bloodiest battle in galactic history. Your grandfather saved my life, Vextar said quietly. He saved all our lives. Without him and the 127th, the galaxy would have fallen to the swarm. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, but she did not speak. Around them, other students leaned closer to hear. The name of the 127th was starting to spread through whispered conversations. Vextar realized that his whole view of this young human had changed completely in just a few moments. 15 years earlier, Vextar had stood on the command deck of the battleship Eternal Vigilance. Through the great windows, he could see the Kepler's gate system spread out before them. The gate itself was a natural formation in space where 3 different star lanes met. Ships had to pass through this area to reach the Corinth, Velos, and Handara systems. If the Void Swarm took control of the gate, they would have a clear path to destroy 40 billion lives. The battle had been going on for 3 weeks. The combined alien fleet had started with over 200 ships. Now, only 60 remained. The Void Swarm creatures seemed endless. They came in waves like a living storm, their dark ships growing stronger each time they absorbed another energy blast. Vextar had been a younger warrior then, serving as a tactical officer under Admiral Thorn of the Altarian Navy. The Admiral was known for his brilliant strategies and had never lost a major battle, but now Thorn looked old and tired. His golden skin had turned pale with stress. "We cannot hold much longer," Admiral Thorn said to the other commanders gathered around the battle table. "Our energy weapons are becoming useless. The swarm creatures are adapting too quickly. Every shot we fire makes them stronger." The other officers nodded sadly. The Centauri General Kresh, leader of the greatest warrior clan in the galaxy, had lost half his fleet trying to fight the swarm in direct combat. The Andromedan commander Nexus had run thousands of battle simulations, but none showed a path to victory. "We should begin evacuation of the civilian populations," General Kresh said. His voice was heavy with defeat. "We can save some people if we retreat now." That was when the human ships arrived. 50 vessels appeared at the edge of the system, moving in formation toward the battle zone. Compared to the sleek alien warships, the human craft looked ancient and crude. They had thick armor plating and simple weapons that fired solid projectiles instead of energy beams. "What are those primitives doing here?" Admiral Thorn asked. This is no place for obsolete technology, but Vextar noticed something different about the human ships. They moved with purpose and confidence. While the alien fleet had been fighting defensively, trying to protect their advanced equipment, the humans flew straight toward the heart of the swarm formation. The human fleet leader contacted the alien command ship. On the communication screen appeared a middle-aged human with graying hair and calm eyes. He wore a simple uniform with no decorations except for a small sword pin on his collar. "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the 127th Human Shock Division," the man said. "We request permission to join the battle." Admiral Thorn looked surprised. "Captain, you should retreat immediately. Your weapons cannot damage these creatures. We have been fighting them for weeks with the most advanced technology in the galaxy, and we are losing." Captain Chen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Admiral, with respect, maybe that is exactly the problem. You have been fighting them with advanced technology. The swarm feeds on energy and adapts to patterns, but humans learn to fight differently." "What do you mean?" Admiral Thorn asked. "We learn to fight dirty," Captain Chen replied. "We learn to fight up close. We learn to fight when everything seems hopeless. Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ways." 10. 5 replied. 10 for $10. 10 for $10. 10 for $10. Before Admiral Thorn could respond, the human fleet moved into attack formation. But instead of staying at long range like the alien ships, the humans flew directly into the swarm formation. Their solid projectile weapons began firing, not energy that the swarm could absorb, but simple metal bullets and explosive shells. The Void Swarm creatures had not faced this kind of attack before. They had adapted to energy weapons, but bullets worked differently. The projectiles punched holes in the living ships and exploded inside them. The creatures could not absorb solid matter the way they absorbed energy, but the humans did not stop there. As the swarm creatures tried to surround them, the human ships did something that shocked all the alien observers. They crashed directly into the enemy vessels on purpose. Human soldiers poured out of the damaged ships, wearing simple armor and carrying primitive weapons, guns that fired bullets, explosives that used chemical reactions, and steel blades. "They are fighting hand to hand," Vextar whispered in amazement. Inside the swarm ships, this was beyond what any alien commander thought possible. The idea of boarding enemy vessels and fighting in close combat had been abandoned by most species thousands of years ago. It was considered too dangerous and too primitive, but the humans fought like their ancestors had fought on their home planet, with determination, adaptability, and a willingness to sacrifice everything to protect others. Captain Chen's voice came over the communication system again. Admiral Thorne, we are going to establish a ground position on the large asteroid near the gate. We will hold it as long as we can. This will force the swarm to fight us the way we want to fight them. That is suicide, Admiral Thorne replied. You cannot hold an asteroid against millions of swarm creatures. Maybe, Captain Chen said calmly. But if we can make them come to us instead of spreading out through space, your ships might have a chance to escape with the civilian populations. Someone has to make a stand. The humans landed on the asteroid and immediately began digging defensive positions. They did not use energy shields or advanced fortifications. Instead, they dug trenches in the rock using simple tools and explosives. They set up gun positions that could fire in all directions. They prepared for the kind of battle that other species had not fought in centuries. Vexitar watched from the alien command ship as the Void Swarm changed direction to attack the human position. Millions of creatures swarmed toward the asteroid like hungry insects. The humans waited until the enemy was very close, then began firing with everything they had. The battle was terrible to watch. The humans fought with no hope of survival, but they fought with such skill and determination that they held their positions for hours. When their bullets ran out, they used explosives. When their explosives ran out, they used steel blades and hand weapons. Captain Chen led from the front lines. Vextar could see him through his telescope, moving from position to position with his sword drawn, encouraging his soldiers and fighting alongside them. The blade flashed in the light as he cut down swarm creatures that got too close to his men. For 6 days, 50,000 humans held that asteroid. They fought without reinforcements, without resupply, without hope of rescue. They fought because someone needed to fight, and because they refused to let the swarm pass. The alien fleets used those 6 days to evacuate millions of civilians. While the swarm was focused on destroying the human position, refugee ships escaped through other routes. The humans had given the galaxy time to save itself. On the 6th day, the human position was finally overrun. But by then, something impossible had happened. The Void Swarm had lost so many creatures attacking the asteroid that their advance had stopped. For the first time in the war, the swarm had been forced to retreat and regroup. When alien rescue ships finally reached the asteroid, they found only 847 human soldiers still alive. Captain Marcus Chen was not among them. He had died leading the final defensive action, sword in hand, buying time for his last soldiers to escape. But the sacrifice had worked. The swarm's attack through Kepler's gate had been broken. The 3 star systems were saved, and more importantly, other human units across the galaxy began using the same tactics. They fought up close, used simple weapons, and refused to give up even when defeat seemed certain. The tide of the war began to turn. The Void Swarm, which had seemed unstoppable when facing advanced technology, could not adapt quickly enough to humanity's primitive but effective fighting style. Other species began to copy human tactics, combining their advanced equipment with human determination and flexibility. Now, standing in the Academy Hall, Vextar looked at Sarah Chen and remembered every detail of those 6 days. He remembered the courage of her grandfather and the sacrifice of the 127th. He understood that the sword she carried was not just a weapon. It was a piece of galactic history. The next morning, Sarah Chen stood with the other new students in the Academy's main training area. Word had spread quickly through the dormitories about her grandfather and the famous sword she carried. Some students looked at her with new respect, but others whispered that she was only here because of her family name. Prince Zeph of the Centauri Royal Fleet was the loudest of the doubters. He was tall and strong, with the traditional blue skin markings of his warrior clan. His family had ruled star systems for 1,000 years, and he believed that noble blood made him naturally superior to others. "She may carry a hero's sword," Prince Zeph said to his followers, "but carrying a weapon does not make you a warrior. Her grandfather earned glory, but what has she done? Nothing. She rides on the achievements of a dead man." Standing nearby was Arya 9, an Andromedan tactical student. Her pale skin and large eyes showed the genetic modifications her people used to improve their intelligence. She studied Sarah with cold curiosity, analyzing her like a problem to be solved. "Humans are unpredictable," Arya 9 said in her precise voice. "They make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. This can be useful sometimes, but it is not reliable. A single example from the past does not prove anything about present capabilities." Sarah heard their comments but said nothing. She had learned from her grandmother that actions spoke louder than words. If these students wanted to judge her, they could do it after they saw what she could do. Instructor Vex's Tar entered the training area with his usual stern expression. After the previous day's revelation, he had spent the night thinking about how to handle Sarah's presence at the academy. Her grandfather's legacy demanded respect, but she still needed to prove herself worthy of being here. "Today, you will face your first major test," Vextar announced to the gathered students. "You will be divided into teams of 3 and sent into the combat simulation chamber. This test is designed to break overconfident students and send the weak ones home. Many of you will fail." He began assigning teams, carefully mixing different species and personalities. When he reached Sarah, he paused for a moment, then made a decision that surprised everyone. "Chen, you will team with Prince Zeph and Arya 9, he said. "Your mission will be to infiltrate an enemy station and retrieve classified data. You have 2 hours to complete the objective." Prince Zeph looked angry. "Instructor, surely there has been a mistake. I should be paired with students of appropriate standing, not with the granddaughter of the man who saved the galaxy." Vextar interrupted, his voice cold. "Perhaps you think your royal blood makes you superior to the bloodline that held Kepler's gate?" The prince fell silent, but his face showed he was not happy with the assignment. Arya 9 simply nodded, accepting the situation as another variable to calculate. The 3 students were given their equipment and sent into the simulation chamber. The room was huge and could create realistic environments using advanced holographic technology. As they entered, the chamber transformed around them into the interior of a space station. Red emergency lights flashed, and the sound of distant explosions echoed through the corridors. "The scenario is clear," Arya 9 said, checking her scanner. "Enemy forces control the station. We must reach the central computer core and download the data files. I have calculated the optimal route and timeline for success." Prince Zeph nodded and activated his energy sword. The blue blade hummed with power. "I will lead the assault. My warrior training makes me the natural choice for command. You two can follow and support me." Sarah said nothing. She checked her grandfather's sword, making sure it was secure on her back, then examined the simple projectile pistol she had been given. Unlike the other students' advanced energy weapons, her gun was basic and old-fashioned. The team began moving through the station corridors. Arya 9 led them along what her computer calculated as the safest route, while Prince Zeph walked ahead with his weapon ready. Sarah followed quietly, watching everything around them. At first, everything went according to plan. They avoided the simulated enemy patrols and reached the station's middle levels without detection. Prince Zeph began to look confident, believing his leadership was responsible for their success. Then something went wrong. The simulation's control computer began making strange noises. Lights flickered in patterns that were not part of the program. Arya 9's scanner started showing impossible readings. "This is not normal," she said, studying her equipment with concern. "The simulation parameters are changing randomly. My calculations are becoming meaningless." Prince Zeph tried to contact the control room, but his communication device only produced static noise. "Instructor Vextar, we need assistance," he called, but no answer came. Unknown to the students, the Academy's main computer system was experiencing a serious malfunction. A power surge had damaged the safety controls for the simulation chamber. What should have been a safe training exercise was becoming a real danger. The holographic enemies began moving faster and attacking with actual force instead of simulated impacts. The walls and floors became solid enough to cause injury. The environmental systems started producing real heat and dangerous gas instead of harmless effects. "We need to get out," Prince Zeph said, his confidence disappearing as he realized the danger. This is no longer a test. But when they tried to reach the exit, they found it blocked by solid walls that had not been there before. The chamber's systems had trapped them inside with malfunctioning equipment that could actually hurt them. Aria 9's scanner began showing critical readings. The simulation is becoming unstable. Environmental hazards are reaching dangerous levels. We have perhaps 20 minutes before conditions become lethal. Prince Zeph tried to cut through the walls with his energy sword, but the blade's power was being absorbed by the chamber's systems, just like the Void Swarm had absorbed energy weapons during the war. His most advanced equipment was becoming useless. Aria 9 attempted to hack into the chamber's computer network to regain control, but the system was too damaged to respond to logical commands. All her careful calculations and tactical knowledge could not solve a problem that had no logical solution. As the two advanced students struggled with failing technology, Sarah stepped forward. She looked around the chamber with different eyes, seeing not a computer simulation but a real environment, with real problems that needed practical solutions. "Stop trying to use the high-tech approach," she said quietly. "It is not working. What else can we do?" Prince Zeph demanded. "Without our equipment, we are helpless." Sarah drew her grandfather's sword. The simple steel blade looked ancient compared to the failing energy weapons around them. "My grandmother told me something my grandfather learned during the war. When the advanced solutions fail, go back to the basic ones." She began examining the chamber walls, not with scanners or computers, but with her eyes and hands. She looked for weak points, structural flaws, anything that could be exploited using simple methods. "The simulation is designed to respond to energy weapons and computer commands," she explained as she worked. "But the basic structure is still real. There must be manual overrides and physical access points." While the others watched in confusion, Sarah began doing what humans had always done best, adapting to an impossible situation by thinking differently than everyone else expected. Sarah moved quickly around the chamber, ignoring the flashing lights and warning sounds that made the other students panic. She examined the walls and floor with her hands, feeling for anything that seemed different from the smooth simulation surfaces. Her grandfather had taught her through his stories that every manufactured thing had weaknesses. You just needed to know how to find them. "There," she said, pointing to a section of wall near the floor. "This panel is not part of the simulation. It is real maintenance access." She knelt down and used the pommel of her sword as a hammer, striking the panel's edges with precise blows. The simple steel was stronger than the electronic locks, and after several hits, the panel popped open to reveal mechanical controls underneath. Prince Zeph looked amazed. "How did you know that was there?" "Because someone has to be able to fix these chambers when they break," Sarah replied, studying the manual controls. "No matter how advanced technology gets, there always has to be a simple way to override it when things go wrong." The controls were labeled in basic galactic standard, designed to be used by maintenance workers of any species. Sarah found the emergency shutdown switch and pulled it hard. Nothing happened at first, but then she noticed a second switch labeled Manual Override, Emergency Only. "Arya, I need you to help me understand these settings," Sarah said. "Your intelligence can figure out the technical details faster than I can." The Andromedan student moved closer, her competitive attitude forgotten in the face of real danger. She studied the control panel and began explaining what each setting controlled. "These controls bypass the computer system completely. They operate the chamber using mechanical systems." "Good," Sarah said. "Prince Zeph, I need your strength to operate these heavy switches. Some of them require more force than I can manage alone." The Centauri prince hesitated for a moment, his pride making it hard to take orders from someone he had dismissed. But as another warning alarm sounded, and the temperature in the chamber rose higher, He realized that Sarah's approach was their only hope. Working together, the three students began manually shutting down the chamber's dangerous systems. Sarah directed the operation, using the practical problem-solving skills that humans had developed over centuries of fixing things that broke at the worst possible times. Arya 9 provided technical knowledge, calculating which systems needed to be shut down in what order. Prince Zeph used his physical strength to operate the heavy emergency controls. The process was slow and difficult. The chamber's computer kept trying to restart the failed systems, creating new problems as fast as they solved old ones. But Sarah had learned something important from her grandfather's stories. Sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to give up, even when victory seemed impossible. The exit controls should be behind that panel, Arya 9 said, pointing to another section of wall. Sarah used her sword again to break open the covering. Inside, she found a simple mechanical wheel that could open the chamber door manually. But when she tried to turn it, nothing happened. "It is stuck," Prince Zeph said, adding his strength to hers. "The mechanism must be damaged." Sarah studied the wheel and the connected mechanisms. She could see that part of the system had been bent by the computer malfunction. The damage was preventing the wheel from turning properly. "Stand back," she said, drawing her sword completely. Prince Zeph looked confused. "What are you going to do? That blade cannot cut through steel reinforcement." "I am not going to cut through it," Sarah replied. "I am going to fix it. I am going to fix it." She used the sword as a lever, inserting the blade into the gap where the mechanism was bent and applying pressure at exactly the right angle. The steel blade was strong enough to bend the damaged parts back into their proper positions. With a grinding sound, the mechanism shifted back into alignment. Now when they turned the wheel, the chamber door began to open slowly. Fresh air flowed in from the corridor outside, and they could hear voices calling their names. Instructor Vextar and several academy technicians rushed into the chamber as the three students emerged. The Zephyrian instructor's face showed relief and concern as he checked each student for injuries. "The main computer system suffered a critical failure," one technician reported. "The safety systems were completely offline. These students could have been seriously hurt." R6. Vextar looked at the three young people standing before him. Prince Zeph's expensive equipment showed scorch marks and damage from the failed simulation. Arya 9's advanced scanners were completely non-functional, but Sarah stood calmly with her simple sword sheathed on her back, showing no signs of distress. "How did you escape?" Vextar asked. Prince Zeph spoke first, his voice carrying new respect. "She let us out," he said, pointing to Sarah. "When our technology failed, she found another way. She knew how to solve problems that our training never prepared us for." Arya 9 nodded in agreement. "My calculations could not account for variables that had no logical pattern. But she approached the situation differently. She looked for solutions that did not depend on computer systems or advanced equipment." Vextar studied Sarah's calm face. She reminded him so much of her grandfather. Quiet, practical, and completely unafraid when facing the impossible. "What did you learn today?" he asked her. Sarah thought for a moment before answering. "I learned that working together is more important than competing. Prince Zeph's strength and Arya 9's intelligence were just as important as my problem-solving. But I also learned that sometimes the old ways work better than the new ways, especially when the new ways break down." The instructor nodded slowly. Then, to everyone's complete shock, he did something that no Zephyrian had ever done before. A human. He knelt down on one knee and bowed his head. "I fought beside your grandfather at Kepler's Gate," he said in a voice that carried across the training area. "I saw what he and the 127th did to save the galaxy. Today, I saw that the courage and wisdom that saved us all still lives on in the next generation." Other students gathering around stopped talking and stared. Instructor Vextar was known for his pride and fierce independence. To see him kneel before anyone was extraordinary. "You have proven that you belong here, not because of your grandfather's achievements, but because you carry the same spirit that made those achievements possible." Vextar continued. "You think differently. You adapt when others cannot. You find solutions when there seem to be no solutions. These are the qualities that make humans valuable allies and formidable opponents. He stood up and looked around at all the assembled students. Let this be a lesson to everyone. Technology fails. Equipment breaks. Plans fall apart. When that happens, you need people who can think on their feet, work with what they have, and never give up. Today, you all saw what that looks like. Prince Zeph stepped forward. Instructor, I owe Sarah an apology. I judged her based on prejudice rather than ability. She saved my life today, and she did it by showing leadership when I failed. Arya 9 also spoke up. I calculated that our situation was hopeless based on available data, but she saw possibilities that my analysis missed. Human intuition and adaptability are variables that cannot be easily quantified, but they are clearly valuable. Sarah looked around at her fellow students, many of whom were now looking at her with new understanding. She thought about her grandfather and the stories her grandmother had told her. Captain Marcus Chen and the 127th had shown the galaxy that humanity's strength came not from superior technology or ancient bloodlines, but from an unbreakable will to protect others and the ability to find hope in hopeless situations. My grandfather's sword is not special because it is made of better metal than other weapons, she said quietly. It is special because it represents the idea that sometimes the simplest tools, in the right hands, can accomplish things that seemed impossible. As the students dispersed to their dormitories, Sarah remained for a moment in the training area. She touched the sword on her back and silently promised her grandfather that she would prove worthy of carrying it. The blade was still simple steel, but in her hands, it carried the power to cut through any darkness the universe might send their way. The legacy of the 127th lived on.